February 12, 2018 meeting of the Greenwood Redevelopment Commission to order at 4:30 p.m. Roll call, please, Amanda.
Mr. Campbell?
Here.
Mr. Harris?
Present.
Mr. Hoover?
Here.
Mr. Moans?
Present.
Mr. Hopper?
Here.
And non-voting advisor, Mr. Alexander?
Here.
Let the record show we have a quorum.
Minutes of our last meeting, January 8, 2019, have been distributed to members of the commission. Is there a motion for approval?
So motion. Second.
Further discussion? Seeing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Motion passes. Under new business, resolution number 2019-01, a resolution confirming Greenwood Redevelopment Commission Resolution 2018-12, amending the declaratory resolution of the Friarwood Economic Development Plan. This is a public hearing. Is there anyone wishing to address this matter? Seeing none, we'll close the public hearing. Is there action the commission wishes to take with respect to this resolution?
I'll make a motion. I'll second it, bro.
Thank you. Further discussion? Seeing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Motion passes.
I don't know if that makes a difference, Kevin, but do we need to have the resolution actually on the floor before we have the public hearing, or does it make a difference?
I thought we'd had that. I thought that had been put before.
Just a question.
No, it's fine.
Okay. BBC Real Estate. I believe Mr. Watson, you're going to address this. Mr. Greenwood is here.
Yes, and you'll recall that we have a project agreement with BBC with respect to the renovation of the 50 Airport Parkway property, and we are nearing completion of that project, or BBC is nearing completion of that project, and we have received a second pay request in the amount of $94,713.84, and I previously provided that to you via email, and provided my comments and evaluation and recommendations, and that is the subject matter that we need to address at this point. Before we would want to entertain a motion for the full approval of the $94,000, I would suggest a couple things. First, I did identify that there was a lien waiver that was outstanding. We have received that, so we can disregard that as an issue. Secondly, there was an amount of $29,258.19 of that full $94,000 amount. That was expenditures for interior tenant improvements and the exterior west or north facing building facades. And under the project agreement, there are some conditions and limitations, and in order to include that amount in this payment request, we would need to get specific approval by the Redevelopment Commission, and I explained that in my email to you. I think it would be appropriate under the circumstances to approve that, but if you have any questions, I'd be happy to try and answer. But that, I think, should be the first thing that gets addressed, and then you'll know whether to approve the full $94,000 that's been requested, or some other amount.
Discussion? Questions for Mr. Watson? Mike?
No, I appreciate the email he sent us and the explanation. It was very helpful. And with that, I would make the motion that we include the amount of $29,258.19 in interior tenant improvements and exterior west or north facing building facades in the payment, and that we would also approve the use of remaining incentive funds to be eligible expenditures on interior tenant improvements and exterior west or north facing building facades.
Is there a second to Mike's motion?
Second.
Further discussion? Seeing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Motion passes.
Thank you. And that would bring us to then the full approval of the $94,713.84 payment request, and you can approve that by motion. And once that is approved, we do have a reimbursement authorization form that the officers will need to sign reflecting that.
And that amount was in 23,392.
I'm sorry, the full amount that needs to be approved, if you're gonna approve the full reimbursement, is $94,713.84.
That's known as payment request number 2.
Correct.
I motion that.
Second.
Further discussion?
Yeah, that does include the 23,000.
It does.
Okay, all right.
That's what I'm saying. Okay.
Further discussion? Seeing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Motion passes.
All right, the last item falls under item 2 on your agenda, and that is approval of the $23,392 of expenditure reimbursement that is authorized under the extension amendment to our agreement. And I would recommend that there be a motion to approve that authorization. And I would, I'm sorry, mention that that amount was presented to BBC and they have approved it.
How much is that? Such a motion.
So moved. I'll say.
Further discussion? Seeing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Motion passes.
Thank you.
Thank you, Steve.
Thank you.
Next is resolution number 2019-02, approving an application for property tax reduction for certain real property located within the East Side Economic Development Area.
There is a possibility that there was no communication to them, that they got put on the agenda.
I don't see Mr.
I
Sherman.
would think Mr. Sherman would know.
Yeah, well, we will hang on to that for a moment and we can come back to it. Request authority to bid Old City Park project. Mr. Steinmetz? Thank you, Mr. Bemis.
Thank you.
Evening, Kevin.
It was black on me. Up there. So today is kind of to give you an overview on Old City Park project. We've talked about this for a couple of years at this commission. Also, Mayor highlighted it in his State of the City speech just last week. And there is, to give you overview and orientation on where this project is, it was included as a project in the master planning that we did in 2014, 2015. It is located immediately north of the 523 South Madison property where the former Greenwood Middle School was, and sits between the city center area and the improvements we just did to the amphitheater. You can also see we got new aerials in January that show the new Sarita Connector Road and some of the improvements that we've done. And so that will be helpful and illustrated as we continue with redevelopment plans. The general overview of the Old City Park project, we're trying to accomplish a variety of things here. So the first, which is incredibly important to both the redevelopment commission and listed, is some of the documents that added Old Town expenditures to the east side and the actual central TIF. Includes stormwater management. You can see that the west side of the property is retained for flooding, essentially. And if you saw last week, with the amount of rain we got, the creek was dangerously close to jumping its banks. It does so about bi-yearly. We retain the open green space that folks have been used to for quite some time in Old City Park, with the north and eastern part of the property that is an area that is higher than the west side, so it's less prone to flooding. we actually take one of the storm pipes. There's about 3 major ones that run underneath Old City Park directly to the stream. Not great for stormwater management. The faster you convey something, you just push the problem to someone else. And we formed a rain garden just north of the library's parking lot that will allow for some on-site detention. Where there is currently a playground that's about 20 years old, we're looking at a more adult or older space that has a game court that can be used for bocce ball. We have upgrading and retention of the WPA steps that run down the hill that have been there since at least 1937. The same thing with the WPA shelter that was built by the National Youth Administration. We had a fitness circuit, something that we're lacking in Greenwood, but a lot of folks have stressed and emphasized and asked for. Long-term goal of the parks. Lockwood Drive becomes a pedestrian corridor connecting the amphitheater with Madison Avenue. Other projects this commission's been involved in. We modernized the bridge, we'll get to that in a second. And then the highlight of the project is a playscape plaza on the hill, adjacent to the First Baptist Church of Greenwood, providing really a signature space that is also connected to the public parking on Main Street. You have a look here at the playscape that will sit up where the white building was, the former BPW building. It has a cube tower as part of its central piece, a very unique piece designed for this park. It has safety surfacing all around it, designed so that if someone does happen to take a little spill, they won't end up with too bad of injury. Standard for all modern large parks. It has a variety of other play elements as well as urban porch swings and climbing walls, things that people would ask for. It has an area for 2 to 5-year-olds as well as 5 to 12-year-olds. It has shade elements and a variety of climbing elements. Also lighting. You can also see here, which is just demonstrative, that historically there were events in the Old City Park on the street fairs for Freedom Fest years ago. This shows you how the northern lawn, the northeastern lawn could be repurposed for whatever event the city or the Parks Department or a private organization wanted to program on that open green space. You can also see the connectivity of all the other assets that we've invested in recently, connecting to the parking lot that's adjacent to the Greenwood Public Library, connecting to Meridian Street, etc. There we go. So those are the 3. We'll get back to the overall. And so if there's any questions about this now, what we'd like to do is just seek authority or a motion. We've done different ways to receive bids for these, to open bids and see where this comes back at. And then, of course, I would be back at the next meeting when we actually have bids in hand. So nothing formal to really vote on today.
The insert there for the parking lot, is that new parking that currently does not exist?
So that's at Main Street by Bonds. If you think about it, there's the Bonds Auto Service, and then you can actually see it on the top of.
So it would be at the top of the hill, north of the park. Okay.
And what this currently serves as is it's a stormwater feature as well. That's permeable. That's how it's scoped. Right now, all that water just, again, conveys directly down to the stream. So we're trying to take steps, whether you live in Greenwood Commons or other places, once Pleasant Run and Pleasant Creek go together at Westside Park, to actually retain water on site rather than just pushing the problem west. So we're constantly trying to look for ways to allow the water to seep in place rather than just getting into Pleasant Creek and causing problems downstream.
That's where Happy Jacksonville sits up, isn't it?
He can sit again, assuming he.
Does this project include redoing that parking lot? Is that?
Yes, it does.
Okay.
And connecting it ideally to the playscape there.
Sounds good.
Kevin, do you anticipate bidding it out with alternatives?
There are some alternatives in it. Also, as part of the bid, we have a general allowance for the playground equipment to purchase separately because we can use collaborative purchasing agreements through the big manufacturers and American communities to purchase that cheaper. We did it at City Center Park. We did it at the pool. You don't really have to. You don't want to pay additional contractor markup when you're buying these things that are already spec'd from manufacturers.
Other questions for Kevin?
Can you give us an idea, since it's a two-meeting,
Yeah,
so it's gonna cost
I'll
over
tell you exactly
$100,000?
what I told the STAR, which is $4 to $6 million. It originally was listed on the plan in that area, and it didn't include nearly as many features as far as Playscape. That included, the original idea was to try to not expand, but have additional water feature on the creek to, again, retain more water in place. The Army Corps of Engineers did not like that, so we've tried to do as best as we can by limiting the amount of water that we're adding to the creek rather than kind of setting back or expanding the amount of water the creek can hold. So this park heavily influenced more than perhaps any, well, West Side Park, but most of our parks by water and flood, which we've got a lot of recently. Any other questions? So I will be back with much more information, a longer presentation, and bid information at the March meeting.
Thank you, Kevin.
Did they actually make a motion to allow you to bid?
We haven't. It's up to Stephen.
So moved. Well,
We need it.
I was thinking that we wouldn't want to do that ordinarily. Now, I didn't think you were requesting that at this point, because that would, in some sense, imply that the RDC was either willing to spend that money, or at least would lead bidders to believe that that might happen. So I don't know that you want to, without some certainty, ask bidders to go through that effort to put bids together.
So Mr. Hopper's motion dies for lack of a second.
Sounds like it.
Okay.
Okay. Here for the next one.
Okay. Thank you, Kevin. Ratification of professional services agreement with Alliance for environmental study, 523 South Madison.
So we now turn to 523 South Madison, the former Greenwood Middle School property. When we awarded the demolition contract, we reached out to the previous environmental contractor who'd done work for the school for quite some time. They filed all the reports. When you go to demolish a building, you have to face different environmental standards and investigations than if you're just using it. So if there's a pipe that's buried underground that may have ancient asbestos pipe wrap or something on it, not a big deal when it's underground and it's not a big thing. However, if you're going to tear it up and put it into a dump, you have new certifications. They came out, identified all the things that could be hazardous, and allowed our demolition contractor to start removing things that can't be destroyed out in a normal landfill. For example, the old light bulbs. There's over 4,000 light bulbs in that school. So what you're seeing right now at the school is the environmental demolition of the products that can't go into a normal landfill, and this contract allowed us to identify those as well as make certain representations to the state to be able to demolish the building. Is the amount of $11,105.
Is there a motion for approval of the professional service agreement with Alliance?
I'll motion that.
Second.
Further discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed the same.
I'm sorry, what TIF districts is that?
The middle school property is currently the east side TIF, right, Greg? We have that in the east side. I believe the project number, Noel's been putting it on that. So that'd be the east side TIF.
Next, consideration installation of vector gas line for new fire station 93 and authorizing insert to the agreement.
I'm still here, but we're switching locations of the city. Now we're going to the southwest side and switching projects. In the 138 improvements to Freedom Park, as well as the construction of a new fire station. We built a fire station at Graham Road years ago with the east side tip, actually. And so we are actually funding the fire station construction out of a general obligation bond. But there are a variety of long utility runs that have to go to service this station, which will be off Cutzinger Road, approximately where there used to be a homestead at the Bright Zone, south of Brighton Estates. We're going to run the gas line over from Honey Creek Road. And so to do as such, we need to be able to pay veteran, because the cost is more than 3 years of what the fire department will pay in rates. And so I checked with Councilor Watson, who determined that in his opinion, legally, this is an eligible TIF expense and meets, fits within the economic development plan for that area. And so we would ask that the Development Commission make a commitment of those funds from the Southwest TIF to pay for running the gas line to the fire department, or the fire station that will be on station 93. It will be its new number on the 40 acres we purchased from the Bright family.
What was that number? Do we have a number on that?
I didn't get a specific document. The number, sorry, I had it. I don't have it in the presentation, so it's just the one, and for some reason it just printed out the picture for me.
Yeah, I only picture.
That's all I received
Yeah, and I didn't
was
get
a picture.
either.
I just have the email.
The picture has roads in it that don't exist.
My notes indicate approximately 29,000.
There you go, yes, $29,000, not to exceed. The original cost of the line, or the actual cost of the line, is over 50, but they do a 3-year analysis of what the fire station will pay, what Mr. Chief Hoggett will pay, and credit that against the capital expense. He loves taking the current station 93 so much, he's asking us to move slower and moving to the new one.
Pleasure of the commission.
I'll make the motion to approve the expense not to exceed $29,000.
Second.
Further discussion?
If I could just comment, the specific email says $29,804.10.
Okay, so we'll make it that motion, 29,800.
Let's do that, not to exceed, especially be sure to include the 10-cent part.
Yeah.
What was that number again?
The lawyer got it.
$29,804.10.
Thank you.
Amend my second.
He
With the
said,
dime.
he said tip, he said he said tip.
No,
This-
State Road 135
Okay.
tip. Southwest side.
I'm sorry, who seconded that?
Steve.
Steve, okay, thank you.
Further discussion? Seeing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, the same. Thank you. Consideration of amendment to PSA with Rundle Ernstberger Associates on the Main and Madison Streetscape.
Yes, so this small amendment covers the fact that when they did all the original sewer televising and investigation, there is some work that needs to be done. Identified a sewer that needs to be replaced on Madison that runs down from Pearl Street to Reverie. There also is some infrastructure that needs repaired on the north side of Meridian. And so this allows Brunel Owensberger and more importantly their sub, Strand Corporation, to design those improvements. And so when we do the streetscape between Madison, or between Pearl and Main, and then Madison to Meridian, we'll be able to fully improve those underground infrastructure items that are in poor shape, and then it allows them to design the improvements on top of them, which are dependent upon those underground designs.
And the amount of that amendment is for additional $31,677.
Correct.
This is for, even the document says about it had to do with Mrs. Curls. Have we completed that sale yet to them? Or are we doing this?
Specifically mentioned Mrs. Curls in that document on the streetscapes.
So is this, has no connection with Mrs. Curls, or?
It has a connection to Mrs. Curls in that it runs it is a landmark, and that the underground utilities and infrastructure around Meridian Street are close to Mrs. Girls, but this is actually within the right-of-ways of Main and Meridian. So part of it was that, not knowing the specific clause you're mentioning, is that there was an obstructed stormwater pipe at the corner of the northwest corner of Main and Meridian that needed to be rebuilt. There was a sidewalk on the northeast side of Meridian that needed reconstruction, and there was coordination with how that would fit with the properties on the south east, but doesn't convey any specific. You have the exact term that mentions Mrs. Girl.
Okay, because the letter from REA specifically says something about Mrs. Curls for the future Mrs. Curls ice cream shop and signal upgrades. Is this?
Oh, the signal upgrades. Okay, yeah, that makes sense. So they're using that as a reference. But what that is we designed the signal REA did with A&F at Main and Meridian so that it could be converted it currently has if you're coming from I-65, there is no dedicated left-hand turn onto Meridian. So think about coming across at rush hour on Main Street, you just have to wait until you can get a turn left onto Meridian. This would allow the recalibration of the lights to do the dedicated left-hand turn light, if that makes sense, the arrow, the protected left-hand turn, that's the terminology, onto Meridian Street. That was part of the signal modifications. And the signal heads and the signal infrastructure, and I believe the signal box that were installed allow for this. It's just a matter of designing the change to do it.
So there's a dedicated left turn lane, but just
Is
not
what
a
they're,
signal
yes.
for that turn.
Yeah, there's not a protected
green arrow.
left-hand turn arrow. There you go. So at rush hour, only one or two cars, depending on how many pull up into that right-of-way get through.
Is there a motion to amend the PSA for Rundle Arnsberger Associates, amount of $31,677?
I'll motion that.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
Further discussion? Seeing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Motion passes. Kevin, you're still here for consideration
Yep.
of engagement letter with Browning Day.
Yes, I am. So now we are back to the 523 South Madison, the demolition of former Greenwood Middle School. The Browning Day, and Amanda did a great job, I think, of specific wording of this in the agenda. The Parks Department has paid for 2 large contracts with Browning Day, one of which was the selective stabilization of the project as well as the demo specs, and then a second greater fee which they've already authorized to turn that area, or turn the northern addition into a field house. Tagging on to that, we have this much smaller contract with Browning Day, so that if there are questions, and there will be questions, they've already been some questions that they have answered, gratis, as they would say. As we tear things apart, we have an actual architect, and more importantly, their structural engineer beneath them to guide us as we go through this. There was a lot of, and working for the government, it's similar, I imagine, the school corporation. There was a lot of improvised fixes over the years and improvised projects that came through. And so as we chase down various lines and wiring and infrastructure, having an architect and structural engineer on deck and to be able to ask questions to will allow us to, 1, aid in the demolition, and 2, stabilize the northern addition for repurpose. And I believe this one's capped at 10,000 from the east side too.
So this is an amendment to the professional
No, it's
services.
produced, it's a, how would you describe it? It's produced in conjunction with that document.
It must be, I guess, a contract for services.
Yeah, it's just a separate contract for services, but it's, you know, the Parks Department is paying the lion's share of that, but it didn't include communication and questions during demo. Basically, imagined designing
I know
after.
Mr. Hoover and Mr. Hopper were here, but is it any kind of connection or similarity to where last year you came and asked for like Crossroads to assist with the management administration of one of your other construction projects?
Yeah, we had a small, Crossroads had a large contract to do the inspection of the roundabout.
The roundabout?
We were able to piggyback on that through a separate contract with the RDC to get a bucket of money for them to inspect Serena Way and Old G. That's exactly what we're. So we're piggybacking off the Parks contract to get a dish for it.
Just for clarification, it says Greenwood Recreation Center demolition.
Yes, that's what it was. It all depends on what wording. So the Parks Department or this commission has not formally named any part of the new, or I guess old, the northern addition to the former middle school. And so there's been lots of versions of how we term these contracts when we're stating a northern addition of the former middle school.
So the Greenwood Recreation Center, is that,
The Greenwood
Is that
Recreation
northern addition?
Center, which may or may not be named the Greenwood Recreation Center, is the northern addition that they are trying to convert or designing into a
well,
field.
when it says demolition though, that makes me think they're gonna tear it down.
There is some demolition in there to stabilize the building, if that makes sense, to run independent, and they're working on that, to run independent utility feeds, separate the HVAC systems, etc. There's a very limited amount of demolition actually within the northern shell to separate it from the rest of the building. There are protrusions and integrated systems throughout that building.
Where's my?
Kevin, I just see the executed document. Is this,
No.
is there an additional document that goes with this that states,
I think it's the new letter dated January 3rd.
Yeah.
Is but what I don't see on this letter is any kind of an estimate on how much work and cost they will actually be
Yeah,
doing.
Kevin said 10,000, but it's not included in the letter.
Yes, so they are going to charge us the hourly rates as determined in the Parks Department contract that Amanda included. My recommendation would be to include a not to exceed of 10,000. So this board likes not to exceed. It is enough that we think will cover the majority of our questions. If we have to come back, we come back. But it's a allocation of on-call services essentially under a PSA that also provides protection for this board to know that it's a manageable amount of funds that have been allocated until we have to come back, if we should come back and ask for more.
I guess my question is, so there's a February 2018 letter that's incorporated at, it looks to be maybe Exhibit A of the PSA, so why are we not doing another one incorporating this one or amending? You're not asking us to amend this one dated April 3rd, 2018.
It's a different, but I can't speak to the actual form of the contract, but it's a different bucket of funds than the money Parks is using to actually fund they funded the initial study and now the final construction drawings, and this would be actually RDC money as it is funding the demolition to that.
The April 3rd agreement's not with the RDC though, correct?
I do not believe so. It's an
No.
integration to the one that's with the Parks Department.
I
If we need to have a standalone proposal,
I
like
would say if you're inclined to move forward with it, I would suggest in the past that you would request the legal department to prepare a PSA based off of a scope of work that does not say draft, and we'll get a scope of work.
And that's why we don't have a PSA,
Yes.
in my package.
You can do it that way, or approve a
Condition.
conditional approval of up to $10,000 with the understanding that Browning will provide a revised letter that incorporates the $10,000 cap, has the draft stamp removed.
sounds good to me.
Pleasure of the commission. How do we do to just, I'll make a motion that we do exceed $10,000, and with the appropriate language put in there. Is there a second to that motion?
I'll second.
Further discussion, are we clear on that? So,
Yes, sir.
okay. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Motion passes. Thank you. Okay, another PSA with Aegis Environment? Am I
Yep,
pronouncing that right?
it's still here. HS Environmental is an environmental consulting firm. This, we asked for conditional approval upon acquisition of the properties we're about to mention. Later, it'd be 247 Pearl 198 East Main and 166 South Washington Street. And so what this will provide is phase 1, as well as asbestos surveys for the 2 buildings that were aforementioned. It would allow us to get started on knowing what the environmental situation is there after acquisition. The total is $7,120. We'd recommend the central TIF, and again, the approval on this would be conditional upon actually closing upon those 2 properties. It basically gives this body phase 1 on both of those properties and asbestos surveys.
Additional questions for Kevin?
Do we anticipate any issues with the phase 1s?
I will tell you that with old buildings in Old Town Greenwood, anticipate everything. So that has been our mind. Whether you're digging,
Thanks.
walking, talking, anticipate everything in Old Town. We'll see.
Because a phase 1 sometimes leads to a phase 2, which gets to be expensive.
Correct.
Okay. All right.
Actually, what's your take on the professional services agreement with Aegis? $71.27. Is there a motion to approve?
So moved as presented.
Second?
Yes. Further discussion? Seeing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Motion passes.
Please made a note that's conditional on the acquisition.
I got it.
Moving on to old business, still Kevin, consideration
Still here.
counter offers for purchase of 247 Pearl Street, 198 East Main, and 166 South Washington.
Now we go back to the board. Oopsie, I must have found it. So, if you remember, we came to this body and talked about 247 West Pearl Street, seen here, it's right off Madison Avenue, adjacent to a public parking lot that was recently excavated for sewer repairs. We talked about this property, 198 East Main, which is right across from Chief Hoggett's abode. And we talked about 166 South Washington, which stands immediately behind the property in the previous slide. You can see them both there. We came in with the average of the 2 appraisals and discussed that we were working on a negotiated cost. I included the stormwater board in here, who has already approved their prices on the 2 they're acquiring as part of this 5-parcel deal in Old Town. And you can see the negotiated prices on the far right, as well as with recommended funding sources. When we were discussing this many properties, I found it best just to get it in an Excel sheet. So you can see $112,250 for the 247 West Pearl, so just about $10,000 over the average of the 2 appraisals. You can see $110,000 for 198 East Main Street, 10,000 above the appraisals, and then you can see 162.25, slightly above. What would that be? About 15,000, but above a much higher base of the 147,500 average of the appraisals on 166 South Washington. And so we're asking the board to approve these higher negotiated prices. Amanda has already drafted the list offers. Again, the stormwater ones are just up there for general education, not any sort of action.
What are we gonna do with these properties? Tear them down?
We are going to do the diligence first, as we saw in the conditional environmental. The two on Main Street, we hope to, through both in-house and perhaps outside advice, determine kind of a use plan for that block. So those two are yet to be determined. Particularly 198 East Main that has Main Street frontage. I'll tell you that 166 South Washington Street does not have the same sort of architectural details as that. It's also built much later and has no Main Street frontage. 247 West Pearl Street. Our plan is to add to the parking lot addition off Pearl Street for some of the use changes we've seen just south of there. Apparently it will involve axe throwing, I recently learned in the IBJ, and planetary ruin.
You're an axe throwing.
So, this, yeah. So,
It seems fairly common practice that we get appraisals, offer an average, and then they come back and want more, and we end up paying more. But I just noticed, actually didn't just notice, but I did notice that whoever's negotiating for stormwater seems to do a better job.
First of all, for 412 Broadway Street, there was a fire at the property. That's why you see it so far below the tax value. So there was a fire. If the property was not bought by stormwater, which plans to demolish it because it's in the flood zone, there would have had to be substantial improvements made and remediation from the fire to bring it back up to an occupied dwelling. So it was appraised as is. As for the 410 Broadway Street, yeah, I think Mr. Jones is just vastly more skilled negotiator.
Made an offer they couldn't
In
refuse.
fact, so much so he should probably take half of these presentations.
It seems like it's common practice we end up paying more.
We do. Part of it is that Mr. Harris lives in an area of town that has seen average sale prices go from around $70 a square foot to well over $100 a square foot. Last year I had an intern who worked for me. This is the biggest increase both in AVs and as far as a percentage based and sale prices. There is one that was just over 1,000 square feet sold or was close to closing for 110. There's also been some much higher than that. Perhaps I like to think due to the investments of this body, Old Town is cool and values are raising fast. And mostly because Mr. Harris lives there.
And I painted the house this summer.
That was key. It's actually listed.
It's all your fault.
Well, can we address 247 Pearl Street first? Is there a motion to accept that offer in the price of $112,250?
Hey Kevin, on that particular property, did that one, the tax value on that one seems really high compared to did that one also have a fire?
No, the tax rate on that one is, I think it's just because it's close to Madison Avenue, and he got the trend effect from everything close to Madison Avenue is moving up rapidly and assessed value due to some of the recent sale prices. We have single family homes selling north of $300,000. It pulls up the homes of similar size and type. And talking to the assessor, this one, which was a multi-story, larger home, it probably got drug up in tax value by its proximity to some of the sale prices we've seen on Broadway and Euclid, etc.
Thank you.
Is there a motion for a list offering price of $112,250 for 247 Pearl Street?
I'll motion that.
Is there a second?
A second.
Further discussion? Seeing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Motion passes. Now
Amanda, can you note that it's central to?
Let's do 198 East Main and 166 South Washington together, combined is 272, 250.
Sorry, Mr. Watson, how do you always set them individually, or do you mind?
They're listed separately as different owners, so we have to do it by owners.
Okay, so we have to do them individually, is what you're saying, your advice?
Yes, the list offer, yes.
From my standpoint, it can be done as a group. It's probably good to have them separately documented, but if you want to have a single motion to approve the several of them, that's fine.
The two you're talking about are the same owner.
Yes, Chester and Tom on both of those.
Okay, whatever.
Since it's on the
Mr.
same
Watson.
list,
Yeah.
I think it's appropriate to go ahead and approve it together.
Is there a motion for that 272, 250 combined values?
So moved.
Second.
Further discussion? Seeing none, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Motion passes. Now we can go on to the other property with 275 East Main Street.
And I just want to remember everything we said about Chris Jones, okay? Negotiate. 275 East Main Street, home that is in the stormwater mitigation, see that stormwater mitigation zone. It is the last house south of Main Street. You'll see that in a second. The owner, just so there's no real question about that, has decided to relocate to Brown County. He's tired of dealing with water, and he decided, since a lot of the other people are taking advantage of the grant and the buyout, that he would also take advantage of that. We have the updated aerial, so you can see that it's the last lone house there on the south side. This was a collaborative effort between us and the stormwater utility. The appraisal on this one came in a little low, but compared to the other properties that we were at, the settlement of 915 is right in the middle for a property or for houses of similar type and similar kind and similar location. It's also multiple months afterwards. And 49% of this acquisition will be reimbursed by stormwater. They've already had that meeting. They've already approved it conditional to your approval, and they've already stated their intent to pay for the demolition, which will run around $10,000. So the request would be to pay $91,500 from the central TIF minus the, of course, reimbursement that would come in from stormwater after closing, and would also include on all these properties the closing costs associated with them. And this would give, if you go back, the RDC / stormwater department, and you can't quite see the bottom of this, a parcel for green space. Again, it's very, very wet, for gardens or monumentation or trails. About, what is it, 3 acres there, Chris? South of Main Street, 3.5. Yeah. It goes down and runs into the neighborhood that has that's named after the it's Polk Manor, right? Yep. Band camp and those various areas. So again, the ask is $91,500 from the central TIF, and this one does not have to be conditional upon stormwater reimbursement because they have already approved 49%.
Pleasure of the commission.
So our motion needs to include the full offer. And
Yes,
then-
you'll acquire it, and then stormwater will reimburse 49% of the purchase cost to the RDC. We've done, what, Greg? 8 of these, 9 of these, works out pretty easy for Greg, and he moves it up, moves the money from, he does whatever accountants do. I don't know, he makes things happen.
So moved as presented.
Second.
Further discussion? Seeing none, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, the same.
That's the exact.
No, Cinch, Central, is that, what are you paying now? Central. Okay, Central, sorry.
Let's move on to capital project reports. Serena Way Extension, change order.
Still here. Last one, I promise. I hope. Sorry, I have that. So this is one of the fun change orders. If you remember, we've gone up and down and down and up on these. This one is down. This is partly due to quantity reconciliation between our inspector and job tickets. This is a reduction of $30,414.86 to the Serena Way, OLG, Meridian Street project. There were some relatively huge quantities in this project as far as excavation, stone, concrete, etc. And so once you reconcile the quantities, sometimes you're up, sometimes you're down. We got it down on this one. So we're still well within the actual capital allocation that the RDC did, which was 37 for this project, 3.7 million. So, and we're pretty much done besides this final reconciliation.
I'll make the motion to approve this change order.
I'll second.
Further discussion, Amanda, do we have anything? I don't have anything in front of me.
You don't have to sign anything.
Okay. Further discussion regarding the motion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Thank you.
Thank you, Kevin. Mr. Sherman, would you like the rest to go back to you? So let's move back up the agenda to resolution number 2019-02, approving an application for property tax deductions for certain real property located within the east side economic development area.
Thank you. Appreciate you moving that back for me. Becknell Industrial is the entity that built the building just to the east of where this proposed building is. And then they also own another parcel to the south of where this is. And those are in your parcel maps that are in the in your diagram that you have. This type of building from an economic development standpoint is really the sweet spot that we'd like to see as far as it's around 150,000 square feet. It can be easily bifurcated or split into 2 or 3 different sizes of areas within that building that lend themselves very well to light manufacturing. It certainly is not the size for distribution. So they built the building 3, which is just to the west of this, as a speculative building. They're building that now. They want to get started on this one right away as well. So from a Greenwood economic development standpoint, it's good for us, speaking Greenwood, not Becknell, because we have this available in our inventory of buildings that will be done, that we have available in our market. So again, it's a speculative building in the application. You can see the investment they have. It's 151,000 square feet. Stephen, they will indicate that what we put in the application as far as the start date and the completion date. They're aware of that and will comply with that, with those dates.
So those dates of May 1, 2019 is a firm construction start date.
Yes,
And
as soon as they can get it through our planning process, and then there's no zoning required under this planning process. It's very similar to the other buildings. So as soon as they get it through planning, they intend to start the building, and they expect it to be done before that date. But with weather and whatever, I pushed that out just a little bit. I didn't think that would bother you too much.
And the completion date in the SB1 is July 31, 2020, and that can be considered a firm completion date. Thank you.
And their total investment is $8,700,000 to include the land. And as you can see in the spreadsheets that we've done, the value of that land goes up considerably. But the purchase, the per acre on the value right now is $1,536, and it's going to go up to $60,000 per acre. And that's because it's off of Emerson. If it was closer to Emerson, which I've heard you talk a little bit, I think the closer you are to the main thoroughfare, the higher higher the value gets to be, because this is one building back from Emerson Avenue, excuse me, not Emerson, Grand Road. It's gonna be a little bit less AD on the ground. Are there any questions I could answer for you?
Questions for Mr. Sherman?
Is there a reason the abatement's 10% drop every year as opposed to the standard schedule?
On a 10%, that is not the standard.
Oh, is it not the standard schedule?
Yeah, they changed it.
And for clarification, I think it's probably better to, for the record, consider June 30, 2019 as being the firm start date commitment. There's a difference in the dates between the application versus SB1. I think to give them more time is probably better, and the SB1 has a little longer time period, and I would suggest that.
Completion dates.
Completion date would be the same. That's what I was quoting from at that time. So June 30, 2019 as the firm start date, and July 31, 2020 as the firm completion date. Thank you.
So with those clarifications, what are the action we should take on resolution 2019-02?
Motion to approve.
Second.
Further discussion? Seeing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Motion passes.
Mr. Campbell, Mr. Hopper, Mayor, I put you down as sponsors for the council tomorrow on the agenda.
Yes.
And you'll be on the agenda Monday, no, next Wednesday the 20th. We're off Monday, President's Day. So next Wednesday the 20th.
I appreciate it. Thank you so much.
Move to department reports. Interim counsel, Mr. Hudson, anybody here? Anybody from, nobody? Mr. Watson, anything further from you?
I do have a little thing to pass on concerning the one-click project. I received an email just advising me that one-click has sold its building to likely is an investor. They're not moving or relocating, they'll just become a tenant in their building. But they did want to let us know that change of ownership.
Mr. Wright, what do we have from you, sir?
The only thing I got for you is the professional services agreement with ADS Consulting. That is Adam Stone, the financial consultant for the RDC. I believe the terms are the same as what last year's agreement was, just be a renewal basically.
Questions for Greg? Questions with respect to the professional services agreement for ADS?
So moved.
I'll second.
Further discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, the same. Thank you, Greg. Mr. Johnston. Evening, Daniel.
Evening.
See you brought some help back there.
Yes. All right, I have a number of items for your consideration today, and I'll try to get through these efficiently. First one is about Morrisville Road, Section 3, specifically parcel 14, that's the Double Creek Mobile Home Park, and relocation costs. There's only 2 homes in this park that are impacted by the project. And so this first one, 001, that's at 2100 East Wood Street. This first cost is actually just for a professional move bid fee, $75. That estimate has already occurred. The documentation we received show that there's a potential that the estimated charges for the move are a little over $9,600. So we'll see that documentation and that invoice at some point in the future. But right now it's just for $75 for the estimate. So my action requested on that one is for approval of the total of $75 for this parcel. as we're doing on parcel 15, Greenwood Estates, with various relocation costs, to delegate the approval authority to the commission member. I recommend the president for any future relocation costs associated with the two homes on parcel 14. Those are my two requests.
Is there any limitations on how far or where we're willing to move these homes?
There is, I'd have to get back to you on that, but there is a limitation based on NDOT relocation process.
And is this one moving very far? Do you know? Just curious.
I'd have to get back to you. Right, actually, and I don't know. Right now, all we have is this estimate here for these fees.
Action with respect to parcel 14.
So we do these separately, for one for the $75 and one for the delegation of authority, or can that be done together? Since it's proposed together.
Together is fine.
Okay. So I move to approve the total of $75 for the parcel relocation cost and to delegate the approval authority to the president of this commission for future relocation costs for homes on parcel 14.
Is there a second?
Second.
Further discussion? Seeing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Motion passes.
Thank you. The next item that I have is for Bristol Road, Section 3, Parcel 8. This is the Greenwood Christian Church. The commission already approved the funding for this acquisition back at the November meeting. The amount was $126,950. But some design revisions were made and actually eliminated some of the temporary right-of-way. You can see kind of in the lower right area of the screen there, I kind of highlighted where a temporary right-of-way was going to be used for a proposed drive location. That drive's actually been moved to the west to line up right across from Autumnwood. That'll help with future traffic. So there was a revised appraisal, very minor reduction of $80. So the new amount, $126,870. And so I have actually already approved and kept this going through process-wise. So I am requesting you to ratify this approval of the revised and reduced amount for parcel 8. Section 3, and to ratify city staff proceeding with the offer and the acquisition. And also to approve the list of offerings, which should have.
It's printed upstairs, I will bring it down, right at the tail end.
I'll make that motion.
Second.
Second.
Further discussion?
Yeah, I'm sorry, Daniel, so this, just so I'm understanding, the handout has a yellow box. Is that what we're acquiring?
The yellow boxes throughout the area are the permanent acquisition.
Okay.
And those orange, it's supposed to be orange colored shapes are the temporary right-of-way that we are acquiring for construction purposes.
Okay, and have we had any discussions with the church to see if it impacts them with any issues in any way? Ingress, egress, future issues with what they want to do with that land?
We met with them one time to discuss it, and they were definitely concerned about having access, and so that's why we're providing the access to the proposed driveway across from Autumnwood.
So that was in response to the church's concerns.
Yes.
Okay. I was just curious, thank you.
Other questions? Pleasure with respect to parcel 8, section 3.
Can you move that slide back to your specific
So it can
request?
be
Oh, I'm sorry.
reduction of $80. approval of the revised reduced offer of 126,870.
Yeah, Mr. Harris motion and Mr.
Okay.
Brown seconded.
And did you second it?
Mr. Brown.
I think it's,
That was our discussion.
that was
Okay.
discussion.
Any further discussion? Sorry. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Motion passes.
So far, he saved us $5. We spent 75 and then we just saved 80.
right.
Profit center. Next, Daniel. Parcel 15.
Next item, actually, parcel 11.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I think on the agenda it had those together. But parcel 11, this is the Callan Family Limited Partnership, the farm, that's actually surrounded by the Greenwood Christian Church property there. So the funding for this parcel, parcel 11, was also approved by the RDC back in November. There's the original amount, $61,685. At the time, or while we were working, our consultant was working with the owners to determine what the impacts were going to be to the farm. The owner actually made a request to modify those driveways to lessen the impacts on the trees. However, that would have negatively impacted the timeline for the approval of the environmental document. So we actually proceeded forward without accommodating those requests. Well, in mid-January, NDOT actually determined that those changes would not necessarily impact environmental documents. So we were able to go back, coordinate with the owner, had a reevaluate the appraisal or revision on the appraisal for the changes. And it came back, actually it was a little higher, $2,700 or approximately $2,700. So I coordinated with the RDC president and council about options of how to move forward. We have already proceeded with that approval just based on the amount. So there's the revised amount, $64,415. That was an increase of $2,730. I did go ahead and proceed with this. The modification to these driveways, the owner was appreciative, definitely said it would smooth over their agreement to agree to the selling us the land for the project. They were very concerned about if the original plan had proceeded forward. So this definitely sweetened the deal for them. And so I am requesting for you to ratify the approval of the funding for the revised offer, the total of $64,415 for parcel 11, to approve the revised list of offerings and to ratify city staff proceeding with the documentation.
And just let you know, Daniel talked to me and we heard Stephen, and not that that's an inconsequential dollar amount, but we thought that was a good use of funds to keep this project on track and moving. That's why I suggested that you go ahead and do this. So is there a motion to ratify that action?
So moved.
I'll second.
Further discussion? Seeing none, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Motion passes.
I mean, that just became a cost center.
That's right.
Yeah.
Yeah, this one goes to
That's a couple of grand in the hole.
Next item, section 3, again, this is parcel 14 and 15, the relocations. I think it was one of the prior meetings, we did delegate that, or you as a commission delegate that authority to the president to approve the various relocation costs. So I just wanted to provide you kind of an up-to-date cumulative amount. So on the chart there, you can see all the different parcels or sites, mobile home sites that are impacted by the project. What you can see in green, those are the items that have already been approved. Yellow or orange are the ones that are pending, either additional documents. Some of the documents, but not all the documents. But certainly will continue in the coming weeks processing these and getting them approved with Mr. Hoover. So the cumulative amount so far is just under $53,000 for these relocation costs for parcels 14 and 15. That's just more of a, to update you on the status there.
Smith Valley Road and Madison Avenue.
On this one, I'm bringing 4 change orders for you now that ADOT has processed a lot of the change orders, or is in the process of approving those. So the original contract amount was $2.88 million. As of December 10th, the overall construction cost, including all of the change orders up to that point, was $2.73 million. I actually got an update earlier today, and total we're at $2.84 million overall, including change orders. So we're still basically coming right in at the budgeted amount. But what we've received are these first 4 official change orders, and so I'm asking for your approval of these. For the change orders, the first one, you can see it there, basically a black powder coating on the pedestrian poles. Number 2 was a black painting on the large cantilever sign next to the pedestrian bridge. Third was removal of concrete pavement under Madison Avenue. This is where the contractor actually ran into some of the old brick pavement under Madison Avenue during their excavation efforts.
We save any of those bricks?
I don't think so.
We lost an opportunity there. Yeah.
And then the 4th was to add the LED backlighting on the wall sign in the southeast quadrant. So on the right-hand side, you have the dollar amounts there. The asterisks, those are items that are actually considered participating by NDOT, which means that they'll pay up to 80%, or they will pay 80% of those costs. So the total there, you have just over $64,000, but NDOT's share of that's going to be close to 41, with the city share around $23,000. So,
Are we near the end of the change orders coming in?
Yes, I think we are. Our consultants who served as our inspectors, they are reviewing all the documents that the contractor submitted and working with NDOT to finalize the numbers. Very similar to what Kevin was talking about earlier. Sometimes the numbers might change based on quantities. But yes, so that number that I mentioned, the $2.83 million, I think it's not a final number, but it's very, very close to the overall project costs. So my request from you tonight is to approve the change orders 1, 2, 3, and 4 for the project, and authorize city staff to sign NDOT's documents and continue with the process.
So moved.
Second.
Further discussion? See none, all in favor say aye. Aye. Motion passed.
Changing projects, excuse me, Worsville Road, section 4B. This is a consideration of a contract amendment to increase for right-of-way services. The project is under construction. Now that, weather dependent, the contractor hopes to be out there performing a lot of the utility relocation efforts. But going back to the design phase, parcel 7, that you see there outlined in the blue, should be pretty visible. That one actually required some additional right-of-way services that were not included in the original contract. As they researched it, they identified an old mortgage that required a partial mortgage release. They had to secure a subconsultant for title policy and closing. not to mention the coordination between all the parties, the city, the owner, the title company, etc. The situation was resolved and the payments were made in November, but in terms of the consulting fees, the additional amount is $2,000, $2,039.37. And that would be on top of the original contract with United Consulting of $334,800. So my request for you today is that you approve that contract amendment for an additional $2,039.37 for additional right-of-way services to allow city staff to prepare the contract amendment documents and to authorize the RDC president and secretary to sign the contract on the commission's behalf when it's available.
I'll make that motion.
I'll second.
Further discussion?
Yeah, just a quick question. Can you remind us what the road is gonna look like out there when it's done? I mean, how many lanes?
Sure. On this segment from, and I don't have a map to quickly pull up, but this segment of Horse Mill Road from Collins Road going east towards Griffith Road to the city limits, this will have 2 lanes, 12-foot lanes with I think a 4-foot wide shoulder, and also have I believe it's a 10-foot trail on the south side of the road.
It'll be a paved shoulder, is that correct?
Yes.
All right. Thank you.
Further discussion? All in favor of the motion, say aye.
Aye.
Motion passes.
And then my last item here, during the plan review process regarding the Amazon development, city staff worked with Scannell Properties, and Sean Copeland from Scannell Properties is here tonight. We worked with them and with Amazon. We identified the benefits of installing the new traffic signal at Worstville Road and Collins Road. So on the image there, the circle identifies the intersection. And Scannell and Amazon are agreeable to participate by way of a restricted donation for this traffic signal. This would be the donation would be into the east side TIF, and it would cover both the design and the construction costs. Now, the city, we would manage the contract. We've already started discussions with a consulting firm, AF Engineering. We've done a lot of projects for the city. We would manage the design contract, pay invoices out of that donation. And then when it came time for construction, the city would publicly bid the project and pay those construction invoices out of the donation as well. With the timeline being that the signal needs to be operational by this fall. And so I have a number of requests for this one actually. So I'll walk you through them. The first is just to approve accepting a restricted donation from Scannell Properties to the site TIF for this project. That'll cover design and construction costs. The second is to direct city staff to prepare the restricted donation agreement, but final terms and conditions to be determined by city legal staff. The third would be to authorize RDC president and secretary to sign the agreement on the commission's behalf once it's available. And then, and then more related to the design, to request RDC to direct city staff to prepare a professional service agreement for the design services, and to authorize RDC president and secretary to sign the PSA on the commission's behalf when it's available.
Daniel, I may have missed this, sorry if I did. So is the restricted donation gonna cover the entire cost?
Yes.
So we will be out of pocket zero?
Correct.
Okay. I just wanted to clarify that. Thank you.
And so the discussions will be, I guess, item B there with the restricted donation agreement. The terms and conditions, I know that our legal staff will work with Scannell to, I think Scannell has expressed that they don't want it to be a open checkbook, so to speak. So they are certainly concerned about the costs that we discussed.
I'd make a motion to approve the 5 requested actions from Mr. Johnston as they appear in the presentation.
I'll second that. Further discussion? Seeing none, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Motion passes.
Great, thank you very much, that's all I have.
Thank you, Daniel.
Thank you, Dan.
Nothing from Mr. Stone, nothing from the mayor. We have the claims docket. Is there a motion to approve the claims docket for February 2019?
I'll motion that.
And the total amount, excuse me, I guess, should say of $3,193,654.03.
Second.
Further discussion? Seeing none, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Motion passes. Any other business to come before the commission?
I would add, one thing in particular, just for the record, we do have confirmation that the fiduciary bond for Mr. Hopper has been received and taken care of.
Walking on
He's official now.
any other business? We'll stand adjourned at 5:51. Thank you all very much.